Hey watch friends, today we're going to take a look at an upcoming offering from the microbrand Revelot, and this is their Hexmariner 39. This is actually a scaled down version of the original Hexmariner, which you might have seen on the channel previously. That one was coming in at 42mm, and we'll look at the detailed specs as we go throughout here. This is going to be dropping on their website on November 10th of 2022, and I'll of course have a link down in the description if you care to check that out. The starting price, I'll hit that right off the bat because this is going to be impressive. These are starting at $249, and as we go through, you'll see why I'm so impressed with that overall pricing. First though, for administrative matters, I do want to mention up front, these two were sent into the channel for review. They are pre-production units, so prototypes, and I don't have to send them back, hence the paid promotion banner. Want to be upfront about that. Additionally, as we go throughout, do stay tuned. We will have comparisons to the original so you can see what that looks like. And then as always, indoor, outdoor, Lume, all that kind of good stuff. But first, let's go ahead and set one of these aside and we'll focus on these one at a time. But before we get into that, let's go ahead and take a quick look at the packaging. If you've seen past Revelot models, the packaging will look familiar. You have an outer cardboard box, which does have this nice heavily applied texture here. You've got gold accents in both the logo as well as the box sticking out there. And then sliding that open, you can see you have the watch presentation, just a very basic watch pillow, and then your 2-year warranty card, just a basic cardboard construction there. Alright, now that we have a better feel for how it's going to come presented, let's look at the specs. I measure coming in from the 2 o'clock to 8 o'clock position at 39.3mm. The bezel does technically step down slightly at 38.9, though I suspect that that's not being able to measure at the 3 to 9 position, because if you see, it does sit relatively flush there. The lugs are coming in at a strap change friendly 20mm. The lug to lug is only coming in at 44mm. And with this having male end links, I went ahead and measured those as well. That only actually kicks it out to 48.3, so it's still a very reasonable sizing overall. The thickness is coming in, I think, at a reasonable 12.9mm, and that is including this flat sapphire crystal, which does have an inner air coating. As you can see, it does sit ever so slightly proud there. The movement on this, as with the predecessor, is coming with a Seiko NH35, so you're going to have your standard features. Nice workhorse movement, hacking, hand winding, of course automatic, decent power reserve, all those kind of good things. The water resistance is coming the same as the prior. This is 200 meters or 20 atmospheres of water resistance. As for the weight, size to my 6.5-inch wrist on this standard bracelet, it's only coming in at 147.4 grams, which I say only, this is right in the middleweight category here. For the sizing, I think they listed at 180 or somewhere there, about grams. Once you get it actually sized, at least on my wrist size, I think it brings it down to a much more reasonable overall weight. 180, probably a little bit hefty for a 39mm watch, but that being said, I think it is well constructed overall, and that's in keeping with the weight. Alright, so now that we have the basic specs out of the way, let's go ahead and take a deeper dive into the model itself. First, for the colors. This actually is going to come in 8 total different versions. There's, of course, the 2 we're looking at today, which there are 6 versions that come with what they refer to as their star dial pattern, which is like this white that we're looking at. And that comes in white, 2 different blue variants, a black version, a green version, and an aquamarine that actually is a full Lume dial. So that's a really cool configuration, and I'm looking forward to seeing that one. There's additionally going to be 2 meteorite versions. There's the limited edition that we're looking at today, and then there's going to be a standard meteorite as well. Each of these, depending on which version you're looking at, will spend the bulk of the time focusing on the star dials, because that's what takes up the majority of the lineup. Those have a nice deep pyramid texture across the dial. It is very 3D in appearance. And all of those additionally are going to have a very lustrous finish to them. I would describe it as kind of like a satin, though it does pick up almost like a pearlescence depending on the way the light's hitting it. That's with the exception of that full Lume dial, which will be more of a matte texture. The meteorite, if you're familiar with meteorite, you know what more to expect there. That's going to be a bit more subdued, though you do have the gorgeous striations as you look throughout that dial. Each of them, though, are going to be in the same overall configuration as far as the dial layout. At the 12 o'clock position, you have the brand logo as well as the name Revelot. Then down at the 6 o'clock position, you're going to have 3 lines of text. You have the Hexmariner, automatic, and then the stated water resistance as well. And then extending further down at the 6, you do have the date window cut out. That is not a color matched wheel, but they did go for complementary colors with that. In the case of the white, we see this black version, and then it stays black for the meteorite version as well, which that is a little more color matched there. On the Revelot, Unlike the prior version, this shifted over, so instead of having numerals, which it is a very steep rehaut, this actually just goes for subtle accented, where it's an etched that says either Revelot Hexmariner or the limited edition on the Meteorite limited edition version. That, I will say, if you are worried about that being too conspicuous, it's very, very subtle, and you really don't see that the majority of the time, so I don't think that's a bad thing that they've lost the numerals going around. Shifting over to the hardware, the handset on this is what I would describe as a paddle handset configuration. It is going to be a mix of both brushing on the flats, as well as it does have nice facets, and those are polished. Really, I think a nice looking handset overall. Additionally, the color, of course, is going to vary depending on which specific version you get. They have a whole host of different coatings and colors that are available there. The second hand ties in nicely with the whole Hexmariner, so the hex theme throughout, where it does have a hexagon both as the counterbalance as well as for the lollipop, which I think is a nice touch there also. Throughout, though, you're going to see that there is a nice use and mix of a combination of textures. We already looked at the dial as far as the satin, but additionally the brushing and the polishing on the facets, and that actually carries over. You do have for the markers here, where those are hex style as well, and of course largest at the 12, 3, and 9 positions, but those are going to have nice polished accents there as well. All of this, as you would expect for the dive style configuration, are going to be a Lume configuration. So with that Lume application, it is going to be either C3, BGW9, or old radium, depending on which version you get. I found the BGW9 on this pair that we're looking at today actually performs quite well. It's applied, of course, to the bezel, as well as all three hands and the markers throughout, and that has endured nicely. Shifting over to the bezel on this is, as you would expect, for a dive style watch, going to be a 120 click and unidirectional. Let's go ahead and listen to that action. Nice tactile click overall. I think the feel is pretty satisfying. Very, very little play, if any, on this. And let's go ahead and shift back to the white version, and we can check that one out as well so we can get an idea how they compare. This one, I will say, of course you're always going to get slight variance, especially in these being pre-production. Just a little bit softer overall, but still, I think, a pretty satisfying action. The white one here, you can notice, is just, I would say, maybe a half tick off as far as the total alignment there. It's pretty darn close to being spot on, but it is a slight shift. As far as the configuration for these, the white, actually all of them, are going to have polished ceramic bezel inserts. On the white version, you are looking at this black polished, and it's just a gorgeously applied polish. I mean, it truly is a mirror finish all the way around, such that it does show fingerprints like crazy. But that being said, I think that is an absolute gorgeous touch and really classes up this watch overall. Out on the perimeter of the bezel, you can see those pyramids really keep in touch with this dial, especially on the star variant that they call them. But you can see just those nice cuts as you go throughout, and that is polished accent as you go through, again, playing with different textures as you go. The 12 o'clock does have a shield, and it is kind of an outlined configuration there. Then you carry through with your numerals, of course, for being dive style, your first 15-minute being most pronounced, and then just carrying with alternating numerals and hashes as you go through the rest of the bezel. As far as the case, let's go ahead and shift over to the limited version here, and we can check that out. All right, as far as the case profile, you can see, of course, with this one, with being the bimetal coloration, which you do have different options there for this, with the nice rose gold accent set up against, and I believe that's a PVD coating, set up against the stainless steel here, and of course stainless all throughout, just being coated there. As far as the actual dial configuration, or rather the case configuration, you can see that this does have nice angular cuts. It's a relatively flowing design, but it does keep just that pronounced, and it's in keeping, if you look at the angles there, with that hex theme, which I think is a really nice touch. The finishing on this is going to be a well-applied brushing, and that is a horizontal or lateral brushing as you go throughout the length of the case, but then it does have nice polished chamfers all the way around as well, so that keeps with a nice angular configuration as you go throughout there. As far as the mid case is very, very thin, as you can see here. That really helps to visually slim this out. That does result in a fairly pronounced caseback appearance that we'll look at as we go through further. Shifting over to the crown side, you can see that this does have integrated crown guards that house that, which I think, again, is in keeping nicely with the dive theme. Let's go and shift back to the white. Keep flipping them around here. All right, so now that we have a better feel for the case itself, let's go ahead and look at the crown. The crown, as you saw, is housed between the crown guards. This is coming in at 6.3 millimeters, and it, as you'd expect for a dive style watch, is a screw down crown configuration. It is additionally signed, and I think they have a nice application of their sun, which is their logo, applied there. As for the caseback, the caseback on this is what I would describe as a semi-exhibition caseback. By that, I mean it does have exhibition glass. However, it does have that etching on the inside, which really breaks it up. And I think is a nice touch. It blends where you get some of the exhibition where you can see the rotor go, while at the same time the NH35 undecorated isn't the prettiest movement in the world. The actual hold down configuration, this is a screw-in caseback, again, in keeping with the dive style watch. And the principal texture is going to be radial or circular brushing all the way throughout there, with a nice subtle etched text all the way around the perimeter, giving you a lot of details. All right, as for the bracelet comes in, of course, the different flavors depending on which version you're looking at. The limited is currently the only one, I believe, that's going to have a bimetal configuration, but they are considering bringing more of those to other variations. So if you are interested in that, do let them know, drop a comment down below, and see if that's something that you think would be a good accent for the other ones that are the bimetals. The bracelet configuration is going to be 20 millimeters at the lugs, and it does taper down to 18 millimeters at the clasp. As we already looked at, it does have male end links, and as far as the overall finishing, this one is going to be principally brushed for the application. However, it does have polished chamfers on the edges, again, in keeping with the overall theme, nice angular cuts as you go through there as well. As far as retention, this is held in with pins and collars. So if you need a tool for that, I will have a cheap kit to be able to get that changed out. Of course, the positive is while it is a little bit more of a pain to adjust than screws initially, you don't have to worry about anything backing out. So that's nice. As far as the bracelet articulation, it really is excellent here. It folds flat to the case, drapes over the wrist well, very nicely done there. The bracelet itself has quick release spring bars, so you can easily switch this over to a strap should you so choose. As for the clasp, this is one of those areas that many people wanted to see improvement on, and let's go and actually get rid of that sticker. The clasp, as you can see, it's keeping overall aesthetically with the style of the original. Let's go ahead and bring that in for a preview. You can see that this has a relatively similar layout, however, it's a dramatically changed clasp as far as the overall configuration. Not only can you see it's longer, but I have additionally found that it nests better on the wrist. So as we saw in the wrist footage there, really think it hugs and contours nicely. And then additionally, it does bump that up to where you have 5 micro adjust holes now. Additionally, it is still going to be a milled configuration for that. So it's nicely machined there. And I think that's a good accent on one of the biggest complaints about the original Hexmariner. All right, so now that we have all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and bring this in for some comparisons. We can look again at this. This is the original Hexmariner. And let's check out the size here. As you can see, it is definitely significantly smaller. It looks almost as if the entirety of the watch could fit just in the dial area of the original 42. But that's not a bad thing at all. In this, I will say, while it wears well for being a larger watch, for me personally, I found this never had any real issues as far as the sizing or anything there. Legibility is still there. And overall, I think this is going to be a sweet spot for many in that it is definitely a smaller configuration, but I think it's very wrist versatile. Here it is next to the Zelos Aurora. So this just gives you an idea with a fixed bezel configuration and a similar overall sizing, 38, 39 millimeters for that, just to see, again, does look a lot smaller. However, I think for overall presence, this is larger than it seems, and the dial presence, I think, is adequate. And then let's bring this in next to another. This is the RZE Endeavor, and this is a 40 millimeter version. Again, just as you'd expect here, this is coming in as the specs would denote on the smaller side. However, I really don't think that this adequately picks up. Go by the wrist footage for that to see if it's kind of your cup of tea or not. For me, though, I found this worked out really well for sizing, and I like that a lot. All right, let's get some of these pillows out of the way, and let's go ahead and bring back the other version so we can kind of wrap things up with overall my personal view of the positives, some critiques, as well as the summary. First, for the positives. These, I must say, I think are an absolutely phenomenal value. Coming in at starting price of $249, I think they're well spec'd for what you get. Of course, 316L stainless steel, very nicely polished ceramic bezel inserts, a use of either this very stylized dial here or your meteorite that you have over here. Nice accents if you want bimetal or if you want a standard configuration, full Lume dial options, just really nice touches and attention to detail all the way around. And I've got to say, finishing, I think for the money, they are very excellently finished. It's clean application, the brushing, the polishing, all of that stuff. Can't really complain about anything there. So I think that's nicely done. Additionally, the style. I've got to say, I'm not one typically for homage watches. That being said, I think this is the way that you do an homage. It really brings in where you can tell it has kind of a loose inspiration from the Submariner. However, they really did their own direction with the whole hex theme throughout, and I think it's well executed. And that brings me to, I think it is a very well thought out. The little touches, the incorporations, the bringing in everything from the bezel into the dial configuration, those little hex touches, whether it be on the second hand or anywhere else, I think that's really nicely done as well. And then as we already talked about, the sizing, I think is going to be great for many, especially if you found the 42 was too big for you. I think this is pretty much the perfect sizing. I really would not want this any larger or smaller. I think it's just right. But that's not to say that there aren't any critiques. First, for the main thing that I will say, depending on whether you're looking at the star or you're looking at the bimetal, this is going to be potentially too flashy or too bold for some. So depending on your taste, obviously, whether stylistically this is one that appeals to you or not. Certainly they are not very subdued designs overall, but I think they're well done, and I don't think they're gaudy or garish either. I can't help but feel with this, despite the fact that I talked about the thinness of the mid case, that this would have benefited even if it raised $50 or $100 to get a Miyota movement in there. You would have gotten a smoother sweep, so Miyota 9 series would have gotten a smoother sweep out of that, but additionally they might have been able to shrink down this case back in this lower portion of the mid case here and really just add to that classy feel and that slimness that you get. This isn't thick by any means in my opinion for the style, however I do think that would have been even nicer. The bracelet, I have to say, the bracelet, while I found to be pretty good overall, it does have just ever so slight sharpness here. It's a very, very minor thing, but I have noticed it on wrist a little bit, somewhat of a slight hot spot to that, so I would have liked to seen this edge, or like to see this edge broken just slightly on the production version. Just a slight chamfer to that, just anything to soften that out a little bit. And then finally, on the dial, there is the 3 lines of text at the 6 o'clock position, and then of course the 2 at the top as well. I don't mind the 2 at the top, and I really don't mind the 3 at the bottom, but especially with being a smaller dial, instead of staying with the original configuration, I wish they would have dropped the automatic and just kept the Hexmariner and then the water resistance or any other configuration just to bring it down to 2 lines. I think with already having a fairly busy dial, that would have helped to keep it even a little more clean for overall aesthetic and help to take away some of the distractions. But that's really all I have for critiques, and they're all very minor items in my opinion, though let me know what you think. But where does that leave us overall? For the summary, I think that these overall package, I think they definitely get a thumbs up from me. I personally expect, especially with being limited quantity, they're only going to have 10 of this version, and I believe 30 of each of the different colorways, so a lot of colorways, but only around 30 of each of those. If you do intend to pick one up, I do encourage you to jump on it. I expect that they're going to sell out very quickly, especially at the price. But there you have it. So now we have a better feel for this watch as a whole. Do let me know what you think. Drop me a comment. Additionally, if you haven't done so already, hit that like button and smash that subscribe button. Thanks for watching.